So why did Shimo freeze Ghidorah and start a giant kaiju war? I literally didn't think he did, but this YouTube title seems pretty certain, so I'm interested. Like, there was the giant kaiju war between the Kong species and the Godzilla species that resulted in the Kongs losing and having to move to Skull Island. I just kind of thought that was started by like Kongs or Godzillas, but perhaps there's something we don't know. So leave a like, subscribe, check out this channel, link down below, and let's go find out.
Let's discuss the true nature of the Titan War and what we believe the dark truth of the conflict actually entailed. In the distant past, the Great Titan War led to the eradication of most of the Titans and sent the remaining survivors into hiding. And while we've seen references to this great conflict before, we don't actually know the full story. So today, fellow heralds of the Titans, let's discuss what we believe happened throughout the course of the Titan War.
See, I guess that was my confusion, but I wasn't necessarily aware of a Titan War. I didn't like, I don't think, I'm pretty sure it's Godzilla having them all go to sleep. Monster Zero woke them all up, and then at the end of King of the Monsters, God Zero, as the new alpha, made them all go back to sleep. I just assumed because they destroyed the planet basically by existing, except for like a select few of them. But evidently there was a Titan War that made them all go into hiding. Which like comic is that from?
Including the roles that Shimo, Ghidorah, and Godzilla would have played, and all the evidence that Shimo is the one responsible for encasing Ghidorah within ice, aiding Godzilla in the fight against the false king, but eventually turning into enemies. To begin though, let's discuss what we know to be true, and then we'll dive into theory. We know that the two main parties were the Titanus Gojira and the Kong, and that this rivalry cuts deep into the distant past. As of now, we don't know why exactly the conflict erupted, but legend tells of one particular evil Gojira that tried to invade the Hollow Earth and the domain of the Kongs. The story comes from Jia's tribe, also known as the Iwa, who tell of a creature that once lived in harmony with the Kong until he ate a star and turned evil. Or so, that is how the story would go.
That actually sounds pretty legit so far. I can't remember specifically which comic that's from, but I remember reading that as well.
Nonetheless though, this unified the Kong and the Gojira together for the first time ever against an unknown enemy. According to the legend, the Gojira and the Kong banded together to defeat this common threat, but in the process, the Kong learned that the dorsal plates of the Gojira could be used to harness the Hollow Earth radiation for their own purposes. After this discovery was made, the Kongs wanted to use the dorsal plates of the Gojira in order to enhance their armaments and prepare for another attack, but the Gojira were adamantly against this. Since the Kong did eventually develop weaponry from the scales of the Gojira, it seems that one of the Kongs stole a dorsal plate, potentially even killing a Gojira in the process in order to get the plates.
You know, those plates grow back. Like, I don't even think it'd be that big of a situation. Like, you could crack those plates off and they regrow. Godzilla has to sharpen them down. It mentions it in the comics. Plus, in 2014, his dorsal spikes were completely shattered. They grew back just years later. You could literally harvest those like quicker than like most crops. So I don't see why they would need to do all that, but I'm interested.
After this, the war erupted. But what if the monster that unified them together in the first place wasn't a Gojira at all? When we first meet the frozen body of the allegedly dead King Ghidorah, he is in Antarctica, not far from an entry point to the Hollow Earth. Mark Russell even points out the curiosity and wonders how Ghidorah ended up so close to an access point to the Hollow Earth, and whether it was just a coincidence or if Ghidorah had wanted something within the Hollow Earth.
I want to believe that it's what he's saying. That sounds so freaking epic, but the legendary writers are kind of all over the place. Even the new TV show kind of canceled out one of the comics because they didn't like read the comics, and they basically just undid a lot of stuff. So I don't think these writers really communicate with each other and connect the big storyline as much as I wish they did.
This spawned a theory that it was actually Ghidorah who first attacked the Titanus Kong and not a Gojira. And we have some evidence to suggest that it would in fact be in Ghidorah's nature to do this. In the King of the Monsters, Ghidorah is referred to as an invasive species, and he throws the balance of the power into question with his arrival, seeing as Ghidorah is not from the planet and is in fact extraterrestrial. Many have theorized, thanks to the original Godzilla lore, that Ghidorah is from Venus, and his arrival ruined the ecosystem of Earth and the balance of leadership among the Titans.
Where did we get Venus from? That's crazy. I had to pause it on Venus. I feel like I'm missing a big gap of information.
Which had to be immediately addressed by the Alphas. Ghidorah did not fit into the established order and was something of a virus that could not be allowed to remain, as he threatened to terraform the Earth to his liking and kill the rest of the Titans. This first spawned this initial rivalry with Godzilla all those years ago between him and Ghidorah, and we know that Godzilla was ultimately able to reign supreme, but it seems that he had more help than we initially thought. But not just from the Kong, but other Titans as well. In the mural, we know that the fight included not just Godzilla, but Mothra and Rodan as well, and Mothra even showed up to help Godzilla again in the present day in King of the Monsters. We do know, however, that Ghidorah has a very strong healing factor, and aside from being literally ripped apart, he can recover from the most gruesome of injuries extremely quickly. Since Ghidorah's body was intact in the ice, however, we are left to wonder how he was kept unconscious for so long, millions of years, to the point where he would freeze over. Or the other option is what we believe. That is, that he was frozen over by a Titan very quickly.
See, we're all familiar with the Shimo freezing Monster Zero thing. I think Dangerville said that a few weeks ago too. I think what sucks though is the producers of the Riot, someone has said that what happened was Godzilla knocked Monster Zero out in a battle and it fell into like water and then froze or something. But it was just always bothered me because it's like, how do you knock out Monster Zero? It's like knock out one of the heads, sure. But like the odds of all three of the heads getting knocked out simultaneously and long enough to freeze that, it's gotta be Shimo, dude.
Right now we know of one monster who can freeze creatures of this size, and we've only seen glimpses of her in the new Empire trailers. We are of course talking about Godzilla's old rival as well, Shimo, who is one of the only monsters we know of who can pull this off.
See, I didn't think they were old rivals, though. I'm not sure we have any information for old rivals whatsoever.
It's even been reported that Shimo was responsible for the first Ice Age, and this is the catalyst for her rivalry with Godzilla. Since Godzilla is the protector of nature.
See, that's confusing also, because doesn't the planet go through natural phases where we have naturally generated ice ages from like every summer a little bit of ice melts, but then the planet starts cooling enough to where every summer a little bit of ice is left, and then the ice builds up, and over thousands of years we get like an ice age. I thought that's what happened.
In King of the Titans, it makes perfect sense that in the new Empire, Godzilla would want to prevent another ice age. And if he saw this power in action once before, we believe that he and Shimo were on the same size. And therefore, we believe the timeline of events in the Titan War went something like this. We begin with the Titans living in relative harmony with one another.
No, but even back when Dagon was alive, which I used to pronounce Dagon, when Dagon was alive and facing Muto Prime, I'm pretty sure Titanus was so much smaller. Yeah, because he hadn't even been nuked then. So the concept of an ancient war with him and Shimo, and he wasn't even big till the 60s when we nuked him.
The Kong are the kings of the Hollow Earth and the protectors of humanity. Gojira, Mothra, Rodan, and several other minor Titans occupy the surface, and all is generally well with the world. The power dynamic is in balance, and barring a few minor conflicts, nothing monumental upsets the balance of Titan power. This is of course until King Ghidorah arrives from a land among the stars, and he immediately seeks to make a home for himself on Earth, even if it means eradicating the current ecosystem. Ghidorah wants to completely usurp control from the Titans, leading to a direct conflict with the Gojira, primarily Godzilla himself. When he makes his way to Antarctica, he wants to invade the Hollow Earth, and this calls for the Kong and the Gojira to unite against a common foe. With the help of Mothra and Rodan, they are able to subdue Ghidorah long enough for Shimo to freeze him over.
But Kong wasn't in the cave paintings fighting alongside them. There's actually no evidence of any of this.
Trapping him in place, and keep him entombed in a prison of ice for what could be millions of years. But we believe the conflict would not end here, as each of these Titans would soon learn something new about the others. Not only does Godzilla see the true nature of Shimo's power and her ability to lay waste to the entire environment, but the Kong see a way to finally topple the king of the monsters from his throne. Now, the Kong set their sights on these dorsal plates, trying to find a way to get their hands on just one, as they've now seen the power in combat. If they can harness these tools, then they might finally have the abilities necessary to rise to the top where the Gojira have reigned for so long. While Godzilla is preoccupied with his building conflict with Shimo.
Didn't they get sent to the top though? They got sent, I guess Skull Island isn't necessarily the top, but that's like where they got banished to after losing the war, I'm pretty sure. So they got to go to the top.
A member of the Kong kills one of the Gojira in order to create the first of these energized axes. Right now, we don't know how Godzilla's conflict with Shimo ended. But if she was truly responsible for the first ice age, then it might be possible that they are still not on the best of terms. Since Shimo is still alive, it's possible that she was driven into hiding by Godzilla and has been hibernating and charging with the power of the Hollow Earth for all this time. The war with the Kongs, however, would have erupted in full force at this point.
Yes, you just kind of got to remember that Godzilla up in the Monarch TV show they showed it, he was way smaller before we nuked him. Our specific Titanus getting involved in all these crazy battles is just kind of bananas.
And slowly, the Kongs have been able to rise through the ranks in order to upset the balance of power. In a previous video, we talked about how the Kong's greatest asset was their ability to adapt to a new environment and their intelligence, whereas the Godzilla—
Well, not really. They all got sent to Skull Island, and then they all died and got massacred, and then it was just like Kong left. So, in fact, they actually all the opposite, kind of. They were not able to adapt to the ecosystem.
Ghidorah became stagnant at the top and reigning over the food chain. We believe this is where Gojira began to die out. Eventually, this war would claim the lives of almost all of the Gojira Titanus species, eventually leaving one lone survivor in Godzilla. This, in conjunction with the Mutos attacking the Gojira species and impregnating them in order to have their children birthed in the place of high radiation, leaving behind Godzilla as the sole king of the monsters. The victors returned to the Hollow Earth after this war in the Kongs, led by the ancestors of the Scar King and his current tribe, while some of the Kongs were spread around the world. One such outpost would be found on Skull Island, where Kong's parents would eventually have Kong and later would be killed by the Skull Crawlers. And it's possible that this could all be traced back to none other than King Ghidorah, and this being the spark that caused the Titan War to break out in the first place, with Shimo eventually freezing Ghidorah over, but in the process starting a massive war. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of our theory? Do you think the true nature of the Titan War is actually much more complicated than we have been led to believe?
It's a pretty good theory. It's hard to connect a bunch of stuff like this because, again, the legendary writers just didn't— I feel like they didn't plan stuff out that far ahead. They seem to just kind of just wing it. I guess my main issue with the theory is just that Godzilla wasn't that big that long ago. Like, he was pretty small. He would have lost the majority of these fights. And again, we nuked him in the 60s and made him ginormous. We like super sped up his growing process. Otherwise, it takes them like millions of years, I'm assuming, to get to full size. So that's basically what happened there. So our Titanus being involved in these mega fights like millions of years ago just is not likely. I mean, thousands of years ago, not millions of years ago. But still, either way, this was a cool, fun video. I enjoyed it. I had a good time. Leave a like, subscribe to this epic channel, link down below, and I'll see you next time.